Podcasts.
The best thing about living on the Isles of Scilly is watching the sunset.
The beaches are like some tropical paradise. Oh.
Harold Wilson used to stay here. I've got one of his drawers, sets of drawers.
I once went to the toilet after Kate Winslet.
Ooh, yeah, that's quite nice.
Oh, my favourite shop. Oh.
Lou, what's my favourite shop on the island?
Co-op. Everyone would have to say the Co-op.
Chemist.
No, it's the Co-op.
Annoying thing about the tourists.
They walk in the middle of the road.
You're walking in the road.
It can feel very isolated.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you very much and welcome to Mark Steele's in town, which this week comes from the Isles of Scilly. Where the people here have pulled off the most amazing achievement of having a reputation for being immensely friendly, even though the reason they're here is they can't stand being near more than 3 people in a month. Because this isn't just remote. Remote isn't remote enough for you. You're people who look at Truro and go, sod that, let's take a boat 40 miles across a violent stretch of sea. No one will find us there. The Isles of Scilly are 28 miles from Land's End, across the sea, on the way to Canada. 5 of the islands are inhabited, there's about 2,000 of you altogether, and one of the first things you notice here is how diverse you are. There's a wide range of white people who feel uneasy if they're more than 400 yards from the sea. It's much like New York. There is immigration here. Last year, someone moved to St Mary's from Tresco to be near the Co-op, and that caused a bit of tension. And it's so easy to get here. Why don't more people come? The I Escape Tourism website boasts sometimes fog or bad weather means your trip to the islands will be cancelled. But that's all part of the adventure. Top marks for making a virtue out of that. We went to the Isles of Scilly for our holiday. We sat in the airport at Exeter for 3 days because of fog and then had to go home. It was such an adventure, the kids can't wait to do it all again next year. Tourists don't always get the idea of being here straight away. Someone here told me I get asked questions like, where's the nearest Waterstones? I say, Penzance, back where you came from. And that's the sort of friendliness that makes it such a popular holiday. St Mary's is the biggest island here, and all the other islands you call... The off-islands. The off-islands, which, that's a bit insulting, isn't it? It's like saying, well, there's St Mary's, and then there's the Shite Island. Now, in some ways, the whole point of the Isles of Scilly is not to get stressed. It's not always easy to understand the pace of life here if you're a Londoner. So, on the first day, you're at the Mermaid going, oh, right, come on, mate. Burger chips, Christ's sake, come on, hurry up, I've been here half a minute already. Come on, get the ketchup, where's the gherkin? Hang on, mate, hang on. Yeah, no, I'm waiting for a burger. Yeah, all right, I'll call you back. Daffodils, yeah, I know, there's bloody millions of them. How far is it to the other end of the island, mate? How far? Get me burger ready. I'm trying to call an Uber. What's the postcode? Yes, Lighthouse, it is lovely. Where's me burger? I've done the bun and now I'm going for a swim. Because this isn't a place for rushing, and the other advice for anyone coming here, don't call it the Scillies or even the Scilly Isles. We are not the Scilly Isles, we're the Isles of Scilly, you uneducated idiot from metropolitan New Quay. This is one of the most remote parts of Britain, but not just because it's so far away from where there are things. It's also the sort of 44 miles there are between here and Penzance, because the water gushes up the channel and meets the water hurtling down the Atlantic, making the sea between here and Cornwall like a giant waltzer. And the Cornwall Live website says, if you've ever sailed on the ferry from Penzance to the Isles of Scilly, you know people across Cornwall give each other a knowing look at the word Silonian. It's not known as the Sickonian for nothing. And I thought, well, that's obviously an exaggeration. And then I got a book called The Amazing Islands of Scilly, a proper book that appreciates the glory of an island. And it started, there is more to Scilly than the nausea-inducing trip on the Scilonian. And spending all your time on the islands dreading the trip back. Here's another piece from Cornwall Live. Soon after leaving the relatively calm surrounds of Mounts Bay, the swell mixed with the aromas from the onboard cafe until I was rushing to the toilet. There followed 2.5 hours of despair. Horrible stomach-heaving despair. I swear I witnessed dogs projectile vomiting. I would have kissed the man next to me when St Mary's finally came to view, except that he had sickle round his mouth. As the vomit comet. The vomit comet, yeah. How do you all manage then? Are you all hardy to it?
Fly.
You fly. I looked at an old book from 1920 called Isles of Scilly, Their Story. Written before we all went soft, I thought. And in the first pages it says, honestly, Scilly is a paradise, but alas, only to be attained by passing through 3.5 hours of purgatory. Do not feel because you have travelled unscathed to Australia and back, or crossed to America without turning a hair, that you are ready for this. How often does one hear, I used to think I was a sturdy sailor until that voyage? And there are hundreds of articles like this. You expect to see the tourist brochure start, I was once mistaken for a nuclear particle and whizzed round the Hadron Collider at near the speed of light. But that was nothing compared to travelling for 3 hours on this Scilonian. And you can't help notice it's called the Scilonian 3, so you think, oh, Christ, what happened to the first? So, we set off, and I thought, here we go. Any minute now, this torture starts. Nothing.
You'll find out on the way back.
Yeah, I know. I am aware of the comedy of this going out a few weeks after the BBC announcer said the radio presenter Mr. Mark Steele is feared missing. Then you arrive at St Mary's and the glorious capital that is Hugh Town, and if you're a tourist, you celebrate your arrival by walking in the middle of the road or hiring a buggy thing and driving it in a zigzag across the island as if you're Donald Trump on his golf course after he's drunk some particularly potent bleach. And there is, of course, you learn this very quickly, Isles of Scilly, don't you, when you get here, that there is one historic building here that the whole area revolves around, at the heart of everything in society, the Co-op. Because the Co-op is the main landmark here. It's like the Eiffel Tower in Paris. I expect you say, oh, when you're close up to it, it's awesome. It's nothing like it is in the photos. It's best to go in the evening to see it under a sunset. It's amazing. If you need anything from firelighters to spiritual awakening, then you have to go to the Co-op. I expect it's like Stonehenge was to the Druids. You all dance naked round it on Midsummer's Day and give thanks to it for providing you with hummus and Pringles. And if there's no vanilla yoghurt one day, that's because the Co-op is angry and you have to make a sacrifice to it and throw an item of furniture into Lawrence's Bay. And it must be the only Co-op in Britain that sells wetsuits. But unlike any other Co-op, there's a rhythm to it. It's full of stuff after the boat arrives with all the deliveries, so you're like ducks when someone's chucked some bread in the pond. Vroom, 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 take whatever you can. No time to stop and think whether you need it or not. Licorice soup, grab 4 tins. But 2 days before the next boat's due, it's empty, except for an old beetroot. So it looks like a scene from a zombie film when everything's deserted. I don't expect that's when you all chant at midnight. Mighty Co-op, great and holy, bring us Heinz tinned ravioli. Someone told me they went in once when the boat hadn't arrived and all it had was dog food and gin. For 3 days, you must all have been going, for variety last night, I stir-fried the dog food in a gin sauce and ate it in a wetsuit. There are a few other shops here. There's Mumford's, the newsagents. Now, is Boatman Steve here? Hello, Boatman Steve. Hello. So, now, you were telling me, Steve, about someone was trying to get a Sunday paper who wasn't used to the protocol.
We get a lot of regular visitors and they get to know the little idiosyncrasies, but new people don't understand. And there's no transport links on a Sunday, so this individual walked into the paper shop and said, I'd like a telegraph, please. And the newsagent said, yeah, I can give you yesterday's. Well, no, yesterday's. I want a Sunday telegraph. Well, if you want a Sunday telegraph, you'll have to come back on Monday.
Also, Steve Wormersley was telling me about that one little slogan that they've got there when the papers can't come.
Well, because there's no travelling on a Sunday, occasionally, if the weather's been really bad on a Saturday, they will open the airport on a Sunday, and then we do get Sunday papers on a Sunday morning. It's a special treat. But there was a sign outside the paper shop that said, Sunday papers available on Monday unless it's foggy on Saturday. Makes perfect sense if you live here, but it baffled a few people.
But it does is like that, yeah. Someone told me they went into a builder's merchant's for a bag of concrete and they wouldn't sell him any, and he said, why not? And they said, because there's only one bag left and someone might come in and want that. But it's amazing how quickly you get into the flow here. Before I came, I got a message to speak to Steve, who lived here, and the times I could call were just really precise. You can call between 12:20 and 1, and then 1:40 until 2:20, that sort of thing. So I rang him and asked him why it had to be those times, and he said, I'm the only bus driver on the island, and that's when the bus is out. And the next morning, I saw that I could listen to Scilly FM, and I thought, all right, I can see if I can get that. And I could get it, because it's digital. And I thought, hang on, that's the same bloke. Now, you think that's normal, but it isn't. In London, people don't, oh, yeah, well, I'm London's only bus driver, so you've got to ring me at that time. And then the next morning, if you put the radio on, you don't think, oh, blimey, Chris Evans again. And so, it's my proud honour to introduce that very person, Steve.
Yeah, hello.
So that's your thing, is to drive the bus round and...
Yeah, I spend half my life driving around in circles.
And is that it, just a circle?
Well, not quite absolutely a circle, but I start in one place and end there, yeah. It's irregular.
Every now and again, if you think you can get away with it, do you reverse 5 yards just for the pleasure of it?
That'll add some novelty to it. I've not thought of that. I might do that, yeah.
The whole thing backwards. And so, because you were telling me that because the same people come here every year a lot of the time, then the tourists get to know you and think you're their friend.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of us, I think the boatmen find this as well, they treat us as close relatives. They really think that we know them really well, and you do remember them slightly, but not very well. But one of the big problems, which I'm careful of now, you get some guy gets on the bus and he's been coming with his wife for years, his wife's not there. How's the missus? She died in February. And it rather dampens the conversation down a bit, so you have to be a bit more careful.
So, Steve, can you tell us about the Department of Transport that sometimes sort of send you questions?
Well, yeah, I'm on the council. The DFT, Department for Transport, used to send a letter quite regularly to the council, essentially demanding to know why our road traffic death statistics hadn't improved. The problem we have is nobody ever dies on the road. But that's no good, because they're interested in, not its absolutes are no good, they want the relative improvement. And the only way really to sort it out would be to run people over and then resurrect them.
Incidentally, someone did send me a message that said, last time I was on the Isles of Scilly, the weather was foul. The bus driver had a notice up saying, just think, you could have had a week in the Seychelles for the money you've spent coming here. Was that you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, Steve, I should ask you this. Do you ever get annoyed when people mention Steve's bus and say, it's not Steve's bus, it's the bus of Steve? Not everybody, not all the tourists grasp the geography here. A taxi driver told me he was asked this summer by a tourist, can you take me to the off islands? Someone who worked in the tourist office said someone asked her which bus went to Tresco. And One of the pleasures here seems to be listening to tourists get confused about which boat they need to get to the other islands. You're used to the sea dominating everything, so you know that you get to the quay and go, I can't go to Tresco as the tide's going the wrong way, but I can go to Briar and walk from there to Tresco in the 40 minutes a day when the sea's not in the way. But if I take too long, I'll be washed away to Greenland. Or I can get the boat to St Agnes and join a fishing expedition for 3 days and transfer to a boat used for a bird-watching documentary for Spanish TV, then pop to Tresco on the back of a dolphin. The book Amazing Island says regular Scilly goers will be familiar with the popular pastime Confuse the Tourist. At 9:45am at the quay, one boat will be headed to Tresco. But as for the other islands, your boat could be anywhere. And the system is that the boatmen meet in the morning and decide who's going where and when. Like if all the train drivers in Britain met at King's Cross in the morning and went, right, you do Newcastle, I'll do Bristol. And then they write the times of that day's crossings on a board by the co-op. But it's just a mass of numbers, like a timetable is a Sudoku puzzle. So a couple of 100 people arrive at the quay, every one of them going, which queue is this? Are you for Tresco? I thought this was St Martin's. St Martin's has gone, mate. It said 9:30 on the board for St Martin's. Yeah, but it went at 9:20. I'm trying to get to St Mary's, like. You're already on St Mary's. I thought I've got the boat to Agnes. Is this the queue for Briar? No, this is the queue to buy a wetsuit at the co-op. What an exciting transport system where you don't bother with any prior knowledge about the time or destination. You're so laid back here, you go, I popped down to the quay to head to Tresco. When the boat set off, I found I was on a naval destroyer bound for Yemen. It's brilliant travelling between them. You're bumping up and down for 20 minutes in the Atlantic, gannets swooping past, looking out for seals. This is the equivalent of the 38 bus to Peckham. And brilliantly, all 5 islands here are so different. There's only 2,000 of you all together, but you still manage to go, you know what they're like over there. Just one example, someone told me the thing with St Martin's is everyone's been married to everyone else at some point. On Christmas Day, a bell rings, they all move round one. On the tourist website, it says things to do on Briar. This is the most marvellous way to advertise a tourist destination. Things to do on Briar. You can walk at your own pace. I wonder how many people think that sounds marvellous, but I'm sick of these holidays where you can't walk at your own pace. Last year we went on holiday into the North Korean army and we had to walk at their pace. I went to Agnes. It's fantastic. It's about 10 yards long. There are 80 people live there. And I walked round the whole of the outside in probably half an hour, very slowly. And I was very pleased to speak to Lou, who is with us. Now, Lou, one thing that you were very, very adamant about is in Land's End, you'll get a sign saying Britain's most southwesterly pub. And that's not right, you don't think?
No, because we're the southwesterly. You were the most southwesterly comedian in the world.
Yes, I would have been the most southwesterly person in the whole of Britain, but there was some bastard about 2 foot further along on a rock that I hadn't spotted. And you were the most southwesterly teacher at the most southwesterly school.
With the most southwesterly pupils.
Yes.
Yeah.
A school that at the moment has how many kids?
Just 2.
And what age are they?
One is 7 and one is 11. And the 11-year-old is just leaving, so next year there'll be just 1.
What was that like then? Because that's 2 really different age groups. I mean,
it is. It's really, and it's like spinning plates when you've got kids of all ages in the same classroom, all on different curriculum, and Ofsted wanting you to tick every box for every year group's curriculum, and you're doing it all in one little space.
Even when there's 2?
Yeah, even when there's 2.
Teaching 2 kids is like spinning plates. When there's just 1, do you think the teacher still goes, I'm dreading parents' evening?
Definitely.
If we go round all the islands, I was told that Tresco is the posh island. And I suppose that's because instead of an empty co-op, they have an empty Waitrose. I went to this grand fete there. There was a jumble sale and a competition to throw a cricket ball into a washing machine. It was Tresco's Woodstock. Roman Abramovich keeps his yacht at Tresco sometimes, and now it's been seized as part of the sanctions, and the sad thing is there's probably half a dozen tourists who got on it thinking it was the boat to St Agnes. Now, Tresco is owned by Prince Charles and leased out to Robert Dorian Smith. And this is a true story. I met someone a while ago who lives here, and I said I was coming here to do a radio show, and they told me, oh, you're not even allowed to let a dog off a lead on Tresco without permission from the governor. So I said, oh, right, I'll make a note of that. And they went, no, you can't tell anyone. They'll all know it was me. And I thought she was joking, so I said, oh, it's too late. I've just texted the BBC and it's going to be on tonight's 6 o'clock news. And they went, no! But, of course, none of this would be an issue in Briar because the dogs are allowed to walk at their own pace. I went to an event here as well called 90s Night at the Old Town Inn. And I thought that was impressive how they managed that because here the 90s are in the future. But it was brilliant fun. Every teenager in St Mary's must have been there, and there was one table of really old people, and I thought, oh, they've just misunderstood and thought you had to be in your 90s. What must it be like to be young here? I listened to Claire Balding's programme about rambling when she was on Tresco, and the person taking her around said, when we go to Penzance, it's cheap to entertain the kids as they're excited by an escalator. And someone told me as there's no college here, it's normal for kids to be here until they're 16, and then they go to Plymouth, which is a bit of a culture shock for them, and then they meet someone romantically and come back. So the plan is you go away to mate like salmon. And it's really hard to get stuff delivered here as well as people. The most unpopular company on the Isles of Scilly seems to be DPD Delivery. Everyone's got a story. I ordered a wedding ring 4 years ago and it's not turned up. And then they go, we have delivered it. It's behind a wheelie bin in Penzance. This wouldn't be a problem in St Martin's because you could just use the ring you used last time. I'm fascinated even how the electricity gets out here. It comes on one cable under the sea. Does someone come round sometimes going, turn the kettles off, the island's charge is down to 4%? And then is there a big extension lead that goes out to the other island so the lights go out in Briar when someone trips over the cable? There was a policeman here called Colin Taylor. How do you not like him?
I like him.
One person likes him. Oh, it's strange because from his book he seemed to think he was quite popular. Well, I like this about you, Isles of Scilly. Like an idiot, I've been reading this book going, oh, he just wandered around getting on with everybody. And you're all thinking that bloody coming over here on his own, on his push bike. He's nicked me for having a bald tyre, he's nicked me son for having a puff. Well, he wrote a book called Life of a Silly Sergeant. None of this is going to work now because I've completely underestimated the anarchistic inner city hostility you have for the law. This is the sort of crime I hear about here. Someone told me that they left their co-op card in a shop, but later on, when it was returned, he found out that someone had claimed the points off it. So rang the police, and the police registered it as a crime. And I'm not even sure how co-op points work here. If you get enough of them, do they keep a tomato aside for when there hasn't been a delivery? Occasionally there is a driving incident here. I was told about a teacher who cut across someone without indicating, and there was a crash. So the other driver said, why didn't you indicate? And she said, everyone knows I go up there to play whist on a Monday. Does anyone know about the crime where someone murdered a chicken? Oh my God! Sexual assault? What the fuck is escalated? I thought That's a bit rough. Someone's murdered a chicken, but now it turns out there's like about 15 different other offences to be taken into consideration.
And he stole it. It wasn't even his.
He stole it. It wasn't even his. I mean, anyone can make a mistake with your own chicken. All of this about what a quaint little old society you are, out here miles away across a dangerous sea with the funny little things that go on and your bags of concrete, oh blimey, and they don't get a Sunday paper. And it's bloody Chicago in 1926, but with poultry. This is all wrong. This is what I've written next. So I believe you like telling people how safe you are here. I haven't locked my house since 1952. Some days I put all my possessions onto the pavement. When I come back, people have added some more to it. That's how I got my washing machine. I went up the Co-op for a wetsuit. When I got back, someone had put one in my kitchen and plumbed it in. That's what we like round here. It's handy as well. I spent all day bowling cricket balls into it. Well, you've got honesty boxes here. They're brilliant. These are just boxes on a wall or by a tree or something with stuff in, like candles or earrings or vegetables. I saw one with a courgette and a book about Jack the Ripper. Then next to the items, there's a jar that you put money in, and there's always money in them that no one takes. And that's what you have here in place of shops. I think that's probably how you buy property here. I was wandering through the old town on the way up to Juliet's garden and I saw an honesty box with a 2-bedroom cottage in it. I left 200 grand in a margarine tub. We move in on Monday. Every rule is different here. This is how you seemed until recently to get rid of your old cars. I read this. Until recent times, old cars were taken to the top of the cliff at Deep Point on the eastern side of St Mary's, knocked out of gear, and with the handbrake off, they would be plunged 200 feet off the edge. Yeah. I love that you're proud of that. Did the people who pushed them off do adverts that went, "We tip anycar.com"? But we are then told not every Deep Point burial went to plan. When the old council rubbish lorry went off, it forgot to sink. It drifted from the islands for many weeks into the shipping lanes between Scilly and Cornwall, becoming a hazard for cargo ships to Bristol. Imagine what that did to the poor sods who passed it, these seafarers. We sailed past Isles of Scilly and faced a creature more terrifying than any I have seen. The size of a whale, jaws of a dragon from hell, and as it passed, it made the terrifying cry. Beep, 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 beep. This vehicle is reversing. Attenborough should make a programme. Some people believe the cars are thrown off the cliff as a sacrifice to the god of the Co-op. And flowers. The way the Gulf Stream works, you get warmer weather here earlier than anywhere else in Britain, so your flowers grow nearly all year round. So Scilly's Folk and Their Flowers says, everywhere there are flowers, flowers, flowers. Everyone is either picking flowers, tying flowers, buying flowers, or talking about flowers. So this must be why you're so careful about caring for the environment, only occasionally tipping a rubbish lorry off the cliff into the sea. You sell 16 million daffodils a year, but the most common flower seems to be the agapanthus. Is that it? A purple one that just spreads everywhere. And I've heard people here describing it as a weed, which, yeah, it's a weed, except you sell the bulbs at £34 for 10. You cheeky Silonian weed selling. So I'd like to introduce Jacqueline, sometimes called the Pied Piper of Agnes. So, Jacqueline, what was your environmental role then over in Agnes?
That was removing the rats because they were predating seabird eggs and chicks. So, St Agnes is rat-free and we're really proud of it. Well,
a lot more popular than the police. So when you say remove them, did you just sort of entice them into boxes very gently and then sort of casually take them to a little rat colony where they would all be happy somewhere?
That's what I told loose 2 children at the school. No, we use rodenticide, so it's a poison. In bait stations, about 3,000 of them. They go back to their dens, and you don't really see what happens, so, you know.
Jacqueline, I have to say, doesn't look at all like someone whose job is mass murder. When we met yesterday, you had a big, wide country hat, which she's going to put on now, and makes you look very much like Dolly Parton, and which I thought was fitting, because it did remind me of the Dolly Parton song that goes, I've danced beneath the sun and had many thrilling moments, but I've never had such fun as out in Agnes killing rodents. It is unfair, of course, to call Jacqueline the Pied Piper, as the Pied Piper took the children away, and that wouldn't really work in Agnes, as there's only 2 to start with. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. You're very, very sensible here. You know you've got a beautifully appealing place, so you're very careful to stop it getting overcrowded by making sure there's hardly anywhere to stay. So the same people come every year and they book up the accommodation for the next year as soon as they leave. So it's like a gentleman's club. You have to wait for someone to die and take their place. If the boat back to Penzance is cancelled after the new people have arrived, tourist information has to put out a call. Can anyone put people up? Have you all had to put people up? Yeah. What a place. Come to the Isles of Scilly for the finest beaches, exciting wildlife and an authentic experience of being a refugee. If you're stuck, you'll be on the sofa of a random stranger, hoping the co-op has 1 cauliflower left before the boat was cancelled. And the history of the Isles of Scilly is that you're marvellously independent here. And I can see why, because you're nowhere near anywhere. The book The Isles of Scilly starts, until the voyage of Columbus in 1492, Land's End wasn't just the end of England, but of the known world. For all men knew, somewhere round Scilly, the sea poured off the edge of the world. And then you'd have tipped whatever you fancied over the edge, wouldn't you? Poor Atlas would have been holding the world up, going, stop it! Chucking horse and carts down here, stop it! The history of early civilisations in Scilly is fascinating. If you want to understand it, I would recommend a documentary called The History of the Scilly Isles. And these are honestly quotes from it. Did the Romans occupy Scilly? We don't know. The pots found here are uninscribed, which means we don't know who made them. Archaeologists suggest there may have been a connection between Scilly and Bath. Is that true? We don't know. There's a huge concentration of burial chambers here. Why? We don't know. Old Town on St Mary's might have once been home to a Roman harbour, though we can't know. The remains of Inisigen were uncovered in 1950, but unfortunately it was looted, so nothing is datable, so we don't know anything about it. The archaeologist Bonsaw's greatest find was the chamber at Porthhellick Burial Chamber. He did extensive work there, but what it contained, we will never know. And then the only records from the Middle Ages are about crime. The Isles of Scilly book says in 1284, a man from St Leven killed a man from Sennen, but it was ruled to be a fair fight. In 1302, a man murdered a monk on Tresco, and the following year, a man was accused of stealing a whale. And in the court case, the victim said, I never locked the door round here. When I came in that night, someone had pinched me whale. And then in the 1540s, the Crown took you over and then seemed to forget about you. And pirates would roam around here. There was a governor who didn't bother living here. And then in 1651, you went to war with Holland. And do you all know about this? That war was finally settled in 1986. And according to the New York Times, Dutch ambassador Jonkheer Hoyd Cooper flew to the Scilly Isles carrying a scroll declaring the war terminated. And the trouble is, because they called you the Scilly Isles, you then declared war on America. And throughout any period of your history, there have been shipwrecks. You love a shipwreck here. When you go in the tourist office, the first thing you see in the tourist office is a book about shipwrecks. It's like you want to say to us, you're lucky you got here. The book The Isles of Scilly says, how many ships have been wrecked around Scilly? We will never know. It goes on. John Pickwell compiled a list of 546 wrecks up to 1967 within 8 miles of the islands. And the museum has an index of 1,000 incidents. And of these, 50 were due to rocks under the water and 1,050 were a result of collisions with floating rubbish lorries. The biggest disaster that I'm sure you all know about, in 1707, 4 ships under the command of Admiral Sir Cloudesley Shovel blew off course and sank off St Agnes, and hundreds of sailors were lost. Cloudesley Shovel's body was recovered, but his finger was missing. Now, at first, it was assumed it was taken by someone who had stolen the ring off it, but then it was realised that someone had left a guinea in the honesty box. And it had only been taken because DPD hadn't delivered one that was ordered 6 months before. The Ceta was a ship wrecked in 1997 with containers full of trainers and tyres and computer mice. So everyone on St Mary's had new trainers and new tyres, and one shop had 32,000 computer mice, which is 16 computer mice for every single person on the Isles of Scilly. So you're not as honest as you make out. Has anyone here got anything from the wreck? Oh, loads of them have their hands up. If only there was a policeman here. One of the most important characters in your history must be Augustus Smith, who was the Victorian gentleman sent here in the 1830s to transform the islands, and was offered the job of Lord, and he came here with the Victorian values of hard work and cleansing the soul and all that, and he came on the condition he could have the church rebuilt and build a new pier, and he brought in clergy and teachers and black rabbits, and... You didn't do for them, did you, Jacqueline? Locals were fined for not going to church. He introduced a postal service, so for the first time at last, islanders could say, "Where's my bathing machine?" and be told we left it behind a wheelie bin in Penzance. So it's not as sleepy as it's made out to be here. It's implausibly peaceful. The sea is this glorious turquoise colour that you'd expect in the Caribbean. You're free of most of the stress that plagues people around the world. But full credit to you, you still find millions of things to moan about. It's marvellous with this idyllic paradise still hearing people go, why do they bloody walk in the road just because we haven't got any pavements? It's all right for them over Tresco with their fancy tins of asparagus. Why don't they check which boat they're getting on before realising it isn't going to the place it says it's going, the idiots? And now they put a concrete block on the quay so big vans have to park 20 yards away. The issue that enrages some of you most is that for some wonderfully creative reason that I can't entirely grasp, you have to give all your money to Prince Charles. Because all the islands, except for Newtown, are owned by the Duchy of Cornwall, and Tresco is leased from him to Augustus Smith's descendants. And if you want anything new here, even a postbox, you've got to ask Prince Charles. I don't know how far this goes. If you want to hang your washing out, does he come over in a helicopter and go, it's gossy underpants? He comes over here quite often, Prince Charles. I hope he's booked 4 years in advance, or I'll have to stay on an air mattress in the unit next to Isles of Scilly Brewery. You do seem to have your own rules here. The only pubs in the whole of Britain that stayed open throughout the lockdown were here. There wasn't a single case of COVID here for the first 18 months of the pandemic, probably because the virus couldn't cope with the crossing. And anyone who had COVID who came here just sicked it all out on the way. And in general, the government should have got iEscape to handle the publicity during COVID, because they'd have said, during the pandemic, everywhere might be shut for a year, but that's all part of the adventure. And the one mainland political figure that you love is ex-Prime Minister Harold Wilson, because him and his wife Mary came here every year for their holiday, and they loved the place, and they retired here, and Mary lived here until she was 101 in a little bungalow, and they're buried here. He's regarded here as a local. He was probably heard saying, why do they walk in the road just because there's any pavements? And then I said, sorry Mary, I thought this boat was going to Tresco and it seemed to be going to Agnes. I heard a story, anywhere else I would think it was made up, that one day in Mumford's a man got very irate because he wanted to buy a copy of the Times, and Mr Mumford said, all these are pre-ordered, I'm afraid, so you can't have one. And the man got so angry after a while that he screamed, I shall write to my MP! And Mr Mumford said, you can do better than that, the Prime Minister's behind you. And he can't have one either. But I think your finest achievement is the Isles of Scilly Football League. Because this claims to be the smallest league in the world, and it's hard to see how it could be beaten, as it consists of 2 teams. According to Wikipedia, the league competition involves the Woolpack Wanderers and the Garrison Gunners playing each other 18 times. And then, even better, they also play each other in a cup tournament as well. If football's governing bodies knew about you, they'd insist that at the end of the season the top teams go into a playoff match. The way to understand the Isles of Scilly is that winter here is completely different from summer, because all the tourists have gone, and in October the Scillonian stops running, and when it leaves for the last time, you know you're stuck here alone for the next 6 months, all by yourselves, and you love it. You're like someone who's had a bit of a party, and around midnight everyone leaves and you go, oh, peace, what bliss. So I will leave you, Isles of Scilly, with one of your famous sea shanties, first sung by marooned sailors in the 1700s, that make you so distinct, not Cornish, but completely in your own world in the middle of the ocean. The finest ever schooner was the ship that sailed to Scilly, for the time we went to war with France and Russia, Greece and Chile. And though they battled gales and storms where every man did throw up, it was worth it when they looked upon the beauty of the co-op. We sailed to where all football teams are in the first division, where toilets would be better in the Spanish Inquisition. It ran aground the rocks to settle in this place. Though it went down to the bottom, it could sink at its own pace. Thank you very much. Where does everyone go later?
Co-op.